Hey, you're listening to the Rosenfeld Review. I'm your host, Lou Rosenfeld, and I'm very happy to be joined by Sha Hwang. Sha, very glad to have you. How are you?
I'm doing well, man. Doing sunny out in Brooklyn.
It is sunny, and we've earned this. We've earned a little sunshine, and this is going to be a really lame segue, but the area you work in, which I'm calling civic design, maybe people call it civic tech, it seems like it's an area that's deserved some sunshine for quite some time. If you don't know Sha, co-founder and COO of Nava Public Benefit Corporation that was formed during the efforts to help fix HealthCare.gov during the Obama administration. And that is a huge issue that you made a big difference on for millions of people at this point, maybe tens of millions. I've lost track. And I don't think it's going to turn around. And you helped save that. And you've been working on other public sector projects here in the U.S. Nava's been working with Medicare, the Department of Veterans Affairs, at the state level, working paid family leave and unemployment benefits. It's really like this lovely area that you work in. And, it seems like Nava's doing really well, and there's a lot of, light and heat and good energy in this whole sector. I think it's totally relevant to Design at Scale, which is the Rosenfeld Media Conference you're going to be speaking at June 9th through 11th. So we'll talk about that in a moment. But how on earth did you find your way into the space? I mean, you were an architect, right?
Yeah, that's and even becoming an architect was something I fell into. Went to school originally for mechanical engineering, and failed out of that pretty quickly. I think the thing that I realized during that process was, in studying engineering at Berkeley, that it wasn't that I was interested in computers or technical systems. I was interested in what I could do with them, and what I could kind of make or create through them. So came in through architecture, but
wait a minute. How did you get from mechanical engineering to architecture? Were you were looking to harness engineering into structuring spaces? So you wanted to get past the how and into the what?
I had actually at the time at Berkeley, Berkeley's engineering program is heavily oversubscribed, and at the time, I was basically given a choice. You can stay in your program, or you're filling a seat. You got to go. Over that kind of first winter break, I ended up finding out about a design firm called IDEO, which is very familiar to lots of folks now. But that was pretty eye-opening for me, coming from more of a technical or a nerdy standpoint, to think about the methodologies applied towards wicked problems, towards kind of unclear outcomes. And that led me to look for a type of program that could accommodate that type of intersection within Berkeley. The original plan was studying architecture, because that was the closest thing that Berkeley had to a design program, or design major at the time. Studying architecture to then become an industrial designer at some point. But in starting and falling into architecture, I fell in love with it. Fell in love with the complexity of the layers of scale thinking, of the joy and the frustrations of designing for things within the physical environment, the kind of complexities and what a friend Brian Boyer calls the matter battle, or like the kind of clumsiness or surprise that comes when ideas meet the ground. Something that you can always defer but never avoid when you're doing things that are complex like architecture. Yeah, and that's kind of what led me into architecture as a practice, and started working at a small firm in San Francisco, and then that's what led me to New York originally, the first time around.
Oh, and what was waiting for you in New York?
Was working at a small firm named Mesh Architectures, and they did a whole variety of both residential and commercial design projects, small scale to large scale. At the time, though, I was working there, was living in New York, was kind of um, experiencing the new city, but was also playing with and tinkering with a lot of the scripting that I had been doing in school around parametric design or generative design. I had started looking at my own personal information and personal data to try to sift through that and make sense of it. I'd started doing things like making maps of where I was spending my money in New York and where that was kind of accruing, or where that was, dissipating into the air. And eventually, two things kind of intersected. One was I finished a small project for Mesh, which was an office interior design project, basically building a conference room. It was the first kind of physical project I had completed. And so went to go visit it, and was hoping for that type of sense of gratification of, your first built project, should be something kind of emotionally resonant for you, and didn't feel anything. And through that, I realized that the tinkering I was doing digitally, the work I was doing, making small websites on the side or playing with different representations of my own personal data, that was actually more visceral to me, and more satisfying to me than the literal kind of wood and glass and bamboo structures that I'd been drawing and designing for months.
Does that have anything to do with the proximity to systems? Maybe a different, maybe not proximity, but maybe a different way to relate to systems than the physical world afforded.
Yeah, I think it's both an aspect of systems and then another of an aspect of tactility, where the type of iteration and feedback loop that I could get through thinking about a change and then seeing that kind of realize itself in the actual product was something that I could there was some push and pull of that material, whereas within architecture there was just such a long kind of slow cascade between the drawings that I was drawing, how they would be interpreted by the contractor or misinterpreted, how they would be negotiated between mechanical engineer, structural engineer, the client, all those sorts of systems, and then ultimately, finally, turning into something that was built.
I'm kind of, as a maybe a small digression,
Yeah.
I assume there's some, you have space at Nava. And
Yeah.
having been through both traditional architecture, I don't know, maybe along the way you read How Buildings Learn, and then kind of being introduced to or connecting to a more fluid digital way to understand spaces and systems. Did it affect the way you designed the space for your team in any important way?
That's a great question, but before you, that's such a critical reference for me and for Nava, because the whole concept of or some of the things present in How Buildings Learn of the pace layers, or the rates of change in a system, is so critical to how we think about Nava's own theory of change, and how we think about our role in engaging with public sector work, or think work that is happening at a deeper layer on the stack. But it does play out also in how we think about our built spaces. It's been pre-pandemic. Nava was working across San Francisco, New York, and DC offices. I think now what and we were also having a growing contingent of folks working out of no office, just kind of fully remotely. Now I think that's the ways that we approach our physical spaces are very different now. We're not in our offices right now, obviously, but how we're thinking about them moving forwards then becomes a much more, rather than a kind of step function of you're either in this binary in an office or not, or in a location with an office or not. How are we thinking about a kind of hub and spoke model of the kind of long tail of smaller touch points that we can have in Chicago, in Philly, in Austin, where we have some critical mass of staff, rather than just needing to kind of make some of these more grand statements of signing a full long-term lease, doing a whole build out, kind of designing conference rooms for situations and environments that then change in 6 months as the company grows.
So I jumped us ahead a bit to your work at Nava, but I feel like we skipped over maybe an interesting stop along your career journey at Stamen. Was that where we were on the threshold of before I took us on the digression?
Yeah, that was that kind of folding point of realizing that or inflection point of realizing that the work that I was doing building digital tools or digital systems had eclipsed the type of creative satisfaction or exploration I was getting out of a very physical process within architecture. That then led to me ultimately leaving New York and moving back to the Bay Area and joining Stamen Design. And that was that was a pretty exciting and important time for me, both as a designer and as an engineer, and kind of someone who cares about organizations, quite frankly, along all those axes. I remember those early days. This was my first time where my job there was technically called, I think, a design technologist, where I was responsible for both designing the visualizations, maps and visualizations that Stamen was building for clients, but then also, building the kind of front end systems or designing the actual code base for them. So I remember just those first few weeks of my first full-time software engineering job in many ways, just coming home and just falling asleep because my brain was so tired from trying to just think and grow at such an intense rate. But that was really formative for me. I learned a lot from Eric Rodenbeck, from Mike Magursky, and from Sean Allen, the partners there at the time.
Yeah, fantastic company. Such an interesting place. But then you made your way back here right after that?
Well, and then there were some detours. So then,
Okay.
Working at Stamen, which was a professional services firm, building visualizations and doing a lot of investigative work for clients, large and small projects and large projects. It was amazing for the variety. But during that time, I ended up basically catching the startup bug, or kind of falling onto a different set of railroad tracks or different roller coaster, and that led to starting a company with a couple of friends, trying to think about how we could apply some of the work and thinking that we were all doing around mapping and visualization, and actually apply that as a product or a set of services to help people look for apartments in San Francisco. So that was a small startup that was called Movity. We applied to and got into the Y Combinator startup accelerator program, which for me was not, I was not very, well versed in, who the players were. This was a very new space for me. In many ways, joining Y Combinator at that time reminded me of some of the same exhilaration of being in architecture studio, being surrounded by folks who were passionate about the topics they were working in, passionate about some of the problems they were working on, and kind of committing a lot of time and energy, and probably too much time, and probably an unhealthy amount of energy towards them. But that was really energizing for me during that time. And then after that, we basically went through this whole kind of small startup or Bay Area roller coaster of starting a startup, going through an accelerator program, raising funding, doing a couple of launches, and then ending up getting acquired by a real estate search site named Trulia, which is now a part of the kind of broader Zillow group.
And the journey is, I think, approaching a very different setting, which is maybe where you got to HealthCare.gov. So why don't we take it into a break, and we'll get to that. And you're listening to the Rosenfeld Review with my guest, Sha Hwang. We'll be right back. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. If you want more, not only do we have a whole bunch of podcasts in our archive, but we have something that's very current, very alive, and very engaging for groups, and that is our communities. Rosenfeld Media runs a variety of communities that meet on a monthly basis for video conferences on a variety of topics near and dear to UX people, ranging from an enterprise experience to advancing research to design and research operations. I want to encourage you to join one of our communities. Again, it is free by going to rosenfeldmedia.com/communities. Not only will you get a monthly video conference that you can listen in on and participate in, ask questions and so forth, we'll give you access to the recordings. And for some of those communities, we're talking about dozens of recordings with really interesting presenters and facilitators. You'll also get a newsletter. You'll get access to an advice columnist. Yes, we actually are providing advice columnists for each community. And finally, if you're interested in our conferences, our communities correspond to our conferences. So you will be the first to know when programs go live, when tickets go on sale, and by the way, most of our conferences sell out, and other good things about our conferences, such as when the scholarship applications open up. So go to rosenfeldmedia.com/communities. You're going to find something that's free, something that's interesting, and it's a great opportunity to find your tribe as well. We'll see you there. Welcome back to the Rosenfeld Review. Lou Rosenfeld with my guest, Sha Hwang. We had just come to the cusp of a really interesting aspect of Sha's journey into design, where it gets to a point where scale suddenly rears its head in ways that I think for anyone in the design space would be almost unimaginable, given the nature of the challenge that you found yourself confronted with. Why don't you background it for us?
Yeah, you've teed it up. I think, and like I was saying, our startup Movity got acquired by Trulia, and part of the excitement of that acquisition process of our team joining Trulia's was that first hit or idea of the promise and the responsibility of scale. Was taking our project, which had primarily looked at searching across San Francisco and the Bay Area, to applying some of those same tools and data and visualizations and mappings towards a national level real estate search site. And some of those products are still in use, and some of those I still use, like school ratings and things like that that are on Trulia. So that was frankly really exciting, and we worked for a long time as a team within Trulia. After a couple of years there, it felt like, from my side at least, we had I had closed that chapter, or we had crossed some of the milestones. We had proven out some of those ideas that they had value, and so I was frankly looking for the next thing. And so I left Trulia at the beginning of 2013, and then took some time off a little bit to kind of rest and recharge and reset. And when I was thinking about the next thing, the thing I actually didn't want to do was tackle another challenge that was highly complex, that was all about scale, or that was kind of hopping on the kind of startup roller coaster again. I felt like I had bought one lottery ticket and it had paid out, and I didn't feel like it was based on my own merits or my own skills. I felt very lucky at the time. So I ended up making the decision to move back to New York. The goal was, work on some small projects, some small creative projects. My partner and I at the time had a couple small e-commerce type experiments, Meshu and Gift Pop. And then a couple months after I moved back to New York, I got a cold email. It was the fall or the winter of 2013. A friend that I had known from the Bay Area asked me, hey, healthcare.gov just launched. It's struggling. Could you come down to Baltimore for a couple weeks and help us redesign healthcare.gov? And I think I got the email at like 11:40 or something like that at night. I was like, I think alone watching a movie or something like that. Was texting with the former partner at Stamen, Mike Magursky, who was then CTO at Code for America. And I was saying like, hey, is this real? What's going on? Is this a suicide mission? Should I take this or not? It seems very political. It seems very tense. Like I haven't done something like this before. And I think Mike very patiently listened to my freak out over text messages. And I think the only thing he replied was like, well, could you make it worse? And, I had felt a lot of things, but I had believed in myself at least enough that I thought I couldn't make it worse. So I ended up taking a train down to Baltimore. And that really, there's no way to, I think, now with some of the lessons of time, I think I can confidently say that this was a life-changing event for me. This changed the direction and the nature and the shape of my entire trajectory through my life and through my career, was taking that challenge on. After that first week of conversations, one of the initial things we talked about was, the call center was flooded, the website was down all the time, legislation was under threat because, the Kaiser Family Foundation had projected that the Affordable Care Act needed at least 4 million people to be enrolled for the legislation to not enter what people would call like a death spiral, where only the most needy or the kind of the most vulnerable were on it, and it wasn't balanced out in terms of risk by healthier or younger populations. So there was a real sense of urgency there. And one of the early conversations the team had as we were assembled together was, that we could build some tools to help the call center. There were 17,000 call center representatives working 24/7 at the time. That we could build tools, an application that they could use to get all the information, answer all the questions, and then submit that information and check for enrollment. And by the end of that first week of conversation, the conversation flipped to, well, if we can build this application experience for the call center representatives, why don't we just make that the website? Why don't we just make that what's user-facing? And so that started kind of folding the effort around building and deploying and trying to insert user-facing experiences on healthcare.gov and testing what was working and what was not. And it was a tense and exhausting, but also incredibly sobering and energizing and clarifying time for me.
Would it be fair to say, though, that fixation on not only a critical audience in that ecosystem, namely the call center reps, but search, forced you to really focus on the short head. We were talking a little bit earlier about the long tail. In settings where scale is such a challenge, I've always felt that identifying the short head, both in terms of users, who the critical audience is, but also what they need and what content you can match them with, is a way to dramatically reduce the scope of the problem space. And I wonder if that is kind of the approach you took there, or just suggested itself, or was there more to it than just the kind of, let's just focus on getting this part right and everything else will sort of come along with it?
There was both, I mean, it was both strategy and tactics, right? And it was both like talking out loud about long-term vision and just gritting our teeth and being comfortable with the hard work to get things done. Mm-hmm. I think some questions we asked ourselves during that time were things like, what can we do now to make sure that a group like us, because at the time we thought we were all temporary, what can we do now to make sure that this next year, the next open enrollment, the red phones aren't picked up again. This isn't just lurching from emergency to emergency, but how are we able to actually affect some systemic or structural change here so that the ecosystem is better, or that so the entire kind of business process is in a better place.
Well, that's an interesting challenge, because initially I would imagine you had the benefit of the urgency, of the emergency. Yeah. And that kind of, let's avoid the death spiral consideration can clear the way of many of the organizational barriers. You stabilize things, you save the system, but now you're looking ahead toward the next enrollment period. At that point, did you have to step back and look to change the way the organization related to the system, what kind of barriers it was throwing up, what kind of cultural issues there were? That's, without an emergency, that's probably where you would have had to start. Or did your momentum kind of help you steer clear of a lot of those organizational challenges?
Yeah, momentum's a great word, because we talk about it a lot, even at Nava. There's a level of, there are some similar motions to what I think of in more of the advocacy or coalition building space of like, you need to build that momentum, maintain that momentum. And we talk also a lot about leverage points at Nava. What are the places to intervene in a system? Coming from readings like Donella Meadows about, what are going to be those insertions or wedges that can solve the immediate need, but also tee up the things that can be structural changes if we have more time. So those I think were some of the critical challenges of that time. One example maybe is, we did a lot of manual logging of which systems, because there are 50 different government contractors involved, many different systems in HealthCare.gov. We were doing some manual logging of which systems were causing the most outages. We found that about 60% of the outages were coming from one system, the identity management system. So we, instead of trying to just duct tape that system, we ended up building a replacement for that, and migrating all of that over. At the time, that was about 12 million accounts on healthcare.gov.
Wow.
And that was tough. There was a lot of, risk and kind of concern around what it would mean to change out an entire system on a large program like healthcare.gov. We ended up doing some things to try to demonstrate the value of that. We ran, we were like, okay, well, let's run a 1 billion user load test on our new system. Let's prove that it can handle things at scale. Let's prove that it's not going to require, dozens of engineers on call, that it can be done with a team of 4. And so proving those things out were really important. And that was, I think, the wedge for us. And now that actually, that login system is actually what a couple years later, we also replaced the same thing on Medicare.gov. So now that same system, we could solve it for the fire, or put out that fire, but also we were trying to build that system in a way where it could be reused in a way that was reducing the total system complexity of the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services.
I also imagine that having that annual cadence of enrollment period after enrollment period actually may have been helpful for you. It sort of time boxed certain efforts and made sure you weren't just sort of working toward an indefinite goal time-wise.
Yeah, I think once we had some of the front ends more instrumented, it was also a pretty sobering one. Like when the Affordable Care Act was signed, there were something like 40 million Americans uninsured. And I think some of the reports were about, 30 to 40,000 people were dying every year because of lack of health insurance. And so the metric that one of the tech leads talked about, and that I think about often, was when we were looking at those metrics, was like every 1,000 roll-ups, every 1,000 applications or enrollments, that was a life that might have been that might be saved a few years down the line. And so watching that come through, that kind of rhythm, every open enrollment, of seeing the tick up, the kind of swells towards the deadlines, and looking at those numbers, being like, okay, every 1,000 a life, every 1,000 a life, every 1,000 a life, and just kind of watching that over and over again it's very hard not to think about how to apply, the skills I built up elsewhere towards these problems now, because of these experiences on healthcare.gov.
It's so interesting as well, like the use of time and having a cadence that, it's like you have a project metronome of sorts. And I just think we often leave time out of our figuring when we're thinking about how we gauge and control and pace our work. We have a little bit of time left. Speaking of time, I know you're doing some interesting, tons of interesting work at Nava, and it's such a great place to be, as well as to be there now here in the States, given a lot of the new administration. So I imagine you're doing some interesting projects, and I wonder if you could briefly tell us a little bit about what you've done as a company for the state of Vermont, because I think that's probably a very different kind of project than healthcare.gov, with some interesting scaling issues as well.
Yeah, the Vermont effort has been just incredibly gratifying. It started out of some federal level research along this research called that people talk about as integrated benefits. So, when you're applying for a safety net program, oftentimes if you're a low-income household or someone from a disadvantaged community, you're oftentimes eligible for multiple government benefits at the same time. But most people don't, and most people shouldn't have to understand the org structure of government to be able to engage with the services that they've already been promised by legislation. So the integrated benefits effort, Nava partnered with Code for America and Center for Budget and Policy Priorities. We did pro bono site visits and did a lot of site research across 10 states. And then we ended up partnering with Vermont on a pilot to integrate some of the benefits at their state level, starting with a pilot around a document uploader piece. So just if you were applying for a program and you needed to upload a copy of your driver's license, that was in Vermont previously was a paper experience, was a field office experience. You took a bus down you brought your ID, you kind of got it. We saw in Vermont that there were cases where, and this is not uncommon at the state level, where, the notice that you got in the mail saying that you had to submit this additional documentation would sometimes come after the deadline where you would have to submit it by. So you'd have to restart your whole Medicaid application, restart your whole SNAP application, that kind of thing. So we piloted a way to do that digitally, just a small module. We started in a couple field offices, having the field office workers, training them up and helping them administer it with staff.
Mm-hmm.
And then we eventually scaled that out. So now that small piece is now shared across all 37 different health and economic programs in Vermont, which is just a wild kind of testament both to the championing at Vermont on the government side and the program director's vision there, and then also just the tedious and patient work on the engineering and technical side of making sure we're fitting all the requirements of all these different programs. And it's a real, I think, success case. We saw people, a dramatic increase in how many people are able to be enrolled same day. People on average are able to get enrolled in the programs 50% faster. And just dramatically, I think, improving the level of access. I think most of the usage we see of that tool comes outside of the business hours of the case, of the field offices where people would have to be going anyways.
And if I understand it, if people want to know more about this excellent case study, it's covered in a brand new book, Power to the Public, by Hannah Schenk and Tara Dawson McGinnis. Is that right?
Yeah, Hannah and Tara wrote this book covering various examples of highlighting case studies of technology and government intersecting and the possibilities and the challenges. We were really honored to be a part of that and to be one of the three examples that they're talking through of this type of change, of this type of design at scale, of this type of kind of work in the public sector. And a couple weeks ago, it was a little bit of a exhilarating thrill for the team when President Barack Obama tweeted recommending this book, Power to the Public, and saying that it offered really concrete examples of what technology could do for the government. And that, quoting one of our team members, Genevieve, who is the design lead on this Vermont effort, she said it made her feel like she wanted to dance and vomit at the same time, seeing that the former President Obama was recommending this book.
Well, it's funny because Hannah and I occasionally talk about book marketing, and obviously I need to be taking more notes, because I haven't really had any former presidents endorse any Rosenfeld media title yet. Before we wrap up, we have a tradition of always tagging something or someone or a book or anything that our guests on the Rosenfeld Review think our listeners should know about. And I think you have a book in mind, speaking of books. Yeah,
I wanted to just give a shout out to Sid Harrell's recent book called A Civic Technologist Practice Guide. I think, it's really excellent landscape introduction for folks interested in diving into this civic design, civic tech type space. But it's also just for people in the space, it's also a helpful reminder of some of the common challenges or the shared practices. And one thing I return to often is something that Sid has mentioned before, where she says something like, we're 10 years in to what is effectively a 50-year effort here. Mm-hmm. And so that's, again, to your think about time, it's a good reminder of the scale of things, the time scale of things, of the nature of challenges we're trying to work on in this space.
It's an excellent book. I'll certainly say it's one of the best non-Rosenfeld media books I've read on design in quite some time. Sha, this has been wonderful. I really want to thank you for being my guest today, but more importantly, I want to thank you and the people on your various teams you've been on for literally saving thousands or maybe even more lives, and certainly touching in a really good way many, many more lives than that. I wish you and Nava even more success in the future. I think we're just as Sid mentions, we're just at the very cusp of seeing what better experiences can mean in the public sector. So thank you for the work you've done and for being a great model for what I hope is much work to come. Again, Sha Hwang is going to be on the program at Design at Scale, June 9th through 11th. It's a virtual conference. I hope you'll join us. It's going to be a fantastic conference. And yes, I'm biased, but you just got to look at the program and know that Sha is just one of many fantastic people that we've lined up to really dig into this challenge of scale. And if you'd like to know more about Sha, a good way to find him is to follow him on Twitter, Sha. That's Sha times 4, if my math is right. And you can certainly learn more about Nava, a company that he co-founded, Nava PBC, that's Public Benefit Corporation, navapbc.com. Thanks again, Sha. Great to have you join us.
Thank you so much. Looking forward to Design at Scale.
Thanks for listening to the Rosenfeld Review, brought to you by Rosenfeld Media. If you like our show, please subscribe and review it on iTunes, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast platform.